The Nintendo 3DS turned 10 years old last year, which is pretty crazy because every time I open it up and use it to this day, it still feels modernized. But maybe that's because the Nintendo Switch left behind so many great things that the 3DS did right. It's always sad to watch things from your childhood grow old, especially when they reach that 10 years old mark, which has been happening to a lot of stuff from my childhood in recent years. Of course, I'm a year late to the 3DS's 10th anniversary, so I'm not going to talk about anything related to its anniversary or its legacy. I'm going to talk about this stuff, the applications that came pre-installed with the 3DS, and I'll also be talking about other random features of the system along the way. I think a good place to start is with the 3DS camera, and I'm talking about the camera itself and the application. Apparently, I spent 51 hours using the camera according to my activity log. I mean, that can't be right, but anyway, I know this feature was very fun for me back in the day, even though the camera quality is obviously pretty bad, and it takes multiple minutes for the application to actually start up a lot of the time. But besides what I just said, there isn't really anything to complain about as far as the camera goes. It was fun and neat as a feature, especially for kids back then like me. You could record videos and take pictures, and with the pictures you could edit them in different ways. There was even special features such as face swapping and stop motion video, which I personally think were pretty impressive for a handheld console back then, especially considering even to this day you need to download apps to achieve face swapping and stop motion abilities on your phone, at least as far as I know. You could also take screenshots on certain games and applications on the 3DS which would appear in the same place as your photos and videos, so the whole camera was essentially the Switch's gallery, but upgraded, despite being over 5 years older. Next up is Nintendo 3DS Sound, which was similar to the camera but a less useful and more of a neat gimmicky addition. Essentially, you just record yourself talking, or just any sound you want, except it only records 10 seconds per clip, and the audio quality won't be the greatest, obviously. While it looks pretty silly now, Nintendo 3DS Sound was also pretty fun to use as a kid back in the day. The cool thing about 3DS Sound is that you could adjust the speed and pitch as well as add different voice changers to your audio, so you could produce some pretty goofy results. While it wasn't very useful and was a bit goofy, as I said, 3DS Sound just helped to make the 3DS a really great system with plenty to do on it. Next up is Download Play, which is a feature that the DS had first, but the 3DS ended up having as well. It's a shame the Switch doesn't have it too, but it's a little late for that. Anyway, Download Play allows you to play multiplayer with other people nearby by downloading the information from the game that they have and joining into their game, so that only one person needs to own a game for multiple people to join in. Or at least that's how I think it works. Of course, if everyone has the same game, multiplayer obviously still works, but Download Play is great for when only one person owns a game, as the other people essentially get to play it for free as long as they're connected on Download Play. You can even play quote-unquote cross-platform with Download Play, as DS's and 3DS's can connect to each other. Download Play, despite not being an original feature of the 3DS, is easily the greatest application that comes pre-installed on the system. Now, Mee Maker, originally a feature of the Wii, is a classic feature of the 3DS regardless of it not originating in this system. Any person who's played a video game in the last decade or two should know how Mee Maker works, or at least what Miis are, but I'll talk about it anyway. Mee Maker allows you to make these goofy little avatars for yourself, your friends, family, or just anybody, or just make something random like this. Miis were important to the 3DS as your Mii helped identify you in many ways, like in Mee Plaza, or even in certain games like Tomodachi Life where you have one resident that is your Mii, and they will acknowledge you as their look-alike. You can also share Miis with other people, and turn Miis into QR codes for people to scan and receive the Mii. Anyways, I'm not going to say anything else about Mee Maker just because it's such a well-known thing and I want to give the other applications some time too. I guess Mee Maker should segue into Mee Plaza and Street Pass. Street Pass is the great feature that allowed two nearby 3DS systems to share information, and when they do this, each 3DS will receive the other 3DS owner's Mii in their Mee Plaza. When you enter Mee Plaza after a Street Pass occurs, you will be greeted by that person's Mii, and everyone you've connected with will be added to your group of people. I don't know what you call this thing, but yeah. And Mee Plaza also offers built-in minigame things, including Puzzle Swap and Find Me, which are both assisted by Street Pass, as the people you connect with will appear in those games to help you progress in them. I've actually been stuck on Find Me since I got my 3DS almost 10 years ago. I don't know why, but I'm still stuck on the final level. It shouldn't have taken this long, and it should have been a lot easier, but I guess I didn't play it as much as I could have. Mee Plaza also has some less important features, but I never really use them, so I don't really know what to say about those. Next is AR games, the application that utilizes the camera to read these AR cards to create AR characters and games for you to play. I never really played this too much, as it was too gimmicky for me even as a kid, but it was still a neat concept, especially for a handheld console over 10 years old. Then there's the eShop, a classic application that I personally never really used. I know it was probably special for some people, but I don't think there was ever a single dollar added to my 3DS, and the most I ever used the eShop for was to get some random free demo games, probably. It's still nice that the shop exists, but I'm pretty sure it's getting shut down, or you won't be able to add funds or something like that soon anyway. So, the shop provides free games, paid games, demos for games, and even virtual console stuff, and the virtual console is something that's pretty cool and I wish I would have tried out, but I never did. Then there's Nintendo Zone, and this thing they shut it down or something, and I never actually used it when it was a thing, so I've got nothing to say about it. And then health and safety information, I mean, no one cares about that, so I'll skip that one too. But then there's Face Raiders, which is a neat but gimmicky pre-installed game on the 3DS that was actually pretty fun back in the day, but nowadays I have no desire to really try it again, because there's much better things to play on this system than just Face Raiders. Still, Face Raiders set what should have been a standard, but the Switch didn't quite follow through because there's no pre-installed games on that. Anyway, Face Raiders is this game where you take pictures of people's faces and it turns them into these flying face creatures that you have to shoot with balls. And the neat and gimmicky part is that you use the camera to play the game. The faces you shoot are brought to life in AR, and you have to move the 3DS around to find them around you. Face Raiders is even capable of detecting how generally old someone is, and also if they're male or female, but it usually fails to do so. But at least it tries its best. Next up is system settings. You can do some pretty fun stuff here. Not really, actually. I mean, you can connect to the internet and stuff, but system settings is just settings, so it's nothing to really get excited about or talk about. Okay, last up for the pre-installed software stuff is Activity Log, which is actually something I really like. It's definitely one of the best things I've mentioned so far, and it's even better than what the Switch attempts to do for recording playtime. Activity Log shows you how many steps you've taken holding your 3DS, how many games you've played, and most importantly, it shows you how much you've played games in any given day, week, month, or year, as well as specific info about each game, like how much you played it, and it organizes your games into rankings such as most playtime to least playtime. Meanwhile, the Switch gives you an estimate of how much you played each game and fails to adapt any of the great features of Activity Log. Activity Log really is a handy feature in the 3DS, and I'm very happy it exists. Here's something kind of sad. Assuming the Switch and 3DS actually counted my playtime correctly, the total amount of time I've spent playing every game I've played on the 3DS is about 1,600 hours. Meanwhile, I've played Fortnite on my Switch for 2,400 hours. I hate to say that, but it's true. Anyway, there's also these 5 other things on the top of the home screen on the 3DS, being Notes, Friends List, Notifications, Internet Browser, and Miiverse. Honestly, I never really used any of these too much, so I can't really say anything about them, but the fact that the 3DS had an internet browser is still pretty cool to this day. Next, I want to mention some other structural differences that made the 3DS better than the DS, starting with the C-pad, or whatever you call it. This thing is truly a great feature, especially since there's a lot more multi-directional movement in 3DS games compared to DS games. The ability to smoothly change directions with the circle pad is better than using a 4-pointed D-pad, where you have to hold 2 points down at once if you want to move diagonally or anything. Even some DS games have more complex movement, like Mario 64 or DS, so it's sometimes better to play them on the 3DS instead so that you can use the circle pad instead of the D-pad. There's also the Start and Select button being moved from next to the screen to below the screen, which along with the new Home button gives the 3DS a nice little control module, as I like to call it, with those three buttons all being in one line right where the screen is. Then there's the Power button, which can only be accessed when the system is open, unlike the DS where the Power button was a slider and it was always accessible on the side. I still prefer the 3DS power button though, and I should mention the 3DS has the wireless toggle in place of where the DS had the power button, and if I'm not mistaken, wireless is what allowed download play to work, so that's a pretty great feature. The last structural thing I want to mention is obviously the 3D slider. The big selling point gimmick of the 3DS was that you could activate 3D, but like me, I'm pretty sure most people barely used it because it's kind of just annoying. Lastly, I want to mention backwards compatibility. It's always great to be able to play games from a previous system on a newer system, and the 3DS can play DS games, so that's great. And even the DS, it could play Game Boy Advance games, and that was also great. But then there's the Switch that can't do it at all, so that's a shame. But at least the 3DS had backwards compatibility, and that's just another reason why it's so good. Well, that's me talking about the 3DS, or at least its features, 10 years later. Well, almost 11 years later now, but technically 10 years later, kind of. Anyway, to celebrate its 10th birthday, let's listen to one of the greatest audios I ever recorded on it using 3DS sound.